We'll get started. All right. Sam says you're a rock star, Rachel. Of course, we already knew that.
Go team.
All right. Well, let me start by just giving everybody a quick update on Rod. He's been very transparent about his open heart surgery today. Taylor, I saw that you posted something post-surgery, so thank you for that. I also received a message from Rod post-surgery. I wasn't so freaked out about it until he started giving me details, and he said literally, like, they take your heart out and put it on a table and do the work and then put it back in you. And that's been haunting me the last 2 weeks thinking about that. So I might have had more anxiety for Rod than he had possibly this morning, but was happy to get a message from him, and he sends his best. And sorry he couldn't be here tonight. Of course, Rod would say that. I'm sure if they gave him his phone right now, he'd be on the call. So best kind of partners you could have. All right. Well, if you were on last week's call, I know that they mentioned that Robert Greene is going to be our additional guest, our speaker for our Young Entrepreneur Syndicate leadership deal down there in Orange County at Chapman University. So really, really excited about Robert being there. Over 20 years ago, his book, 48 Laws of Power, sat on my desk for 10 years while I was in the corporate world. And it was my regular reading material because I just liked his perspective. And what's interesting, something that Rod brought to me the other day about Robert Greene is that, you know, some people say that this book's a little sinister, a little underhanded, ways to get back at people. And, you know, if you're doing that ladder climbing. But what he had suggested is a different version of that. And I like to think that that's how I looked at it, was Robert Greene is an observer of history and ways that people have done things. And I always perceived the written word in that book as being an observation and a way that I can learn more about people and how they might react or act in any given situation. So it was interesting how Rod quickly drilled into that and brought that thought to the forefront. And I think it's an important thought, is can we be observers in life and business and learn from our observations, really, and not to do some of the bad things, but also learn from the good things and apply those traits and behaviors to our regular practices. So in the spirit of Robert Greene, tonight's lesson is going to be a combination of Robert Greene and not oddly enough, but appropriately enough, what I learned at church this weekend. And so the title is going to be Long-Term Strategies. And if you listen to the podcast that I did with Rod and I think it came out this morning, it was on preparedness. And what came out of that was this thought process on long-term strategies and what that looks like. So I'm going to open it up with basically the opening of chapter 29 from Robert Greene. And no, I didn't memorize it, but the chapter is called Plan All the Way to the End. And in brief, what it says is the ending is everything. Plan all the way to it, taking into account all the possible consequences, obstacles, and twists of fortune that might reverse your hard work and give the glory to others. By planning to the end, you will not be overwhelmed by circumstances, and you will know when to stop. Gently guide fortune and help determine the future of thinking far ahead. What I love about that is that it plays right into the same thing that I've talked about in this group since day one. And one of the things that I've coached on the last 5 to 6 years is, what is your business plan? What does that look like year 1 and year 5? And if you don't have that, you're not planning ahead. You don't have a long-term strategy. So if you haven't done that work as much as I've said it, or brought it up, or if you work for somebody else, look at what your long-term strategy is and plan on the twists and turns that come with that. And I absolutely believe in having a 5-year marker, because if you can reach out to 5, then you can reach out to 10, and everything starts to come together. So 1, 5, and then maybe look beyond. Things change. If that's one thing you can count on, and that is for things to change. I give you an example in my own business, when I wrote my business plan for Azuñia Tequila, spent 6 months writing that plan, polished it up, rewrote it, sent it to investors, and the initial plan was to raise $5 million. Big number. And we had deliberated enough with our investors that they committed to $5 million. And then you get into the paperwork side of it and tossing things back and forth and they give this and give that. Well, at the end of the day, what wound up happening is they invested $3 million with 2 more on retainer to pull. But that seemed like such a far distance away to get that we had to redevelop what that short-term plan was and how we had used the smaller amount of money, knowing what our end goal was. Now, our end goal for that brand was always to be that $100 million brand. I just came off of Kettle One Vodka. We sold for $2 billion. I think arrogance was running high amongst myself and my partners. Like, we got this, we're going to be big. And so we had to get real smart in a hurry to look at how we would use those $3 million instead of the 5. And we built that back into our plan. Now, we took a lot of twists and turns along the way. We had a huge uptick in business the first 6 months, which added to our confidence in the business. But then literally the bottom fell out. And we spent the next 6 months to 12 months chasing our tails, trying to figure it out, still knowing what the end game was. Now, for me, some of those twists and turns where I lost almost everybody that had come on board in the beginning, because that's when the hard work began. The guys that were working for me came from Kettle One, all good people, but they were used to that cushy lifestyle, walking in, taking an order like it was a natural fit, not having to push too hard for it. Well, that was the days of Kettle One. It sold itself because we'd been around for 15 years. And you start trying to sell something new, it gets a little bit harder. I'm sure Jim will attest to that in his current business plan with Kush Cubes. You got to tell people what the brand is and the why and the how and where you're going and who the people are and the price and get them to sign on the dotted line. Well, when things get hard, you tend to get derailed a little bit. But if you can go back to the long-term plan, you can get back on the path. So what I wound up doing is rewriting a portion of that business plan and repitching to our investors the success we had early, the pitfalls that we had, and how we were going to run the company down the road to recoup what had been lost. And we did that in a way that the investors actually went beyond that $5 million all the way up to $12 million. So when you listen to the story, we went from 5 to 3 and then up to 12 through some twists and turns, some wins, some losses, wins, losses. I mean, it got pretty rocky for a while. And then kind of, I don't want to say it was smooth sailing because it was never smooth, but the plan was on target and people bought off on it to the point where they were willing to continue to invest. Now, simultaneous to the business plan of that company, I always had my own personal plan. What was it that I wanted out of the business? And I had different hopes and desires for the end game. But as it was pointed out to me from my wife at the time, she said, "Hey, Jim, you're not the same person in this company that you were when I met you a few years ago. Maybe it's time we look in different places. Maybe it's time that you move on." Well, I'd already built a plan within the organization or the structure of my contract with the company that I was able to get a solid exit out of there that set us up to be able to leave the company that I'd started. So the point of that is that there's a lot of lessons within one lesson, and that's having a long-term plan and what you'll do and planning for anything. And I'll throw this out there. It's a little bit of a sidebar for planning for anything worth noting down if you're going to start a business with somebody or if you're going to go into partnership with somebody. If you're going to form an LLC or an Inc., and you are the CEO, or if you're an executive within that company, not a board member, but an executive, it's okay. And I would recommend having an executive contract with the company that you started. So for an example, I'm happy to be transparent about it. I had a contract as the CEO of Azuñia Tequila with the company that I started. And it mapped out if I were to be terminated or left the company by investors or other, that I would receive a balloon package from the company. And that sat in the original drafted documents that the original investors had a chance to see. And when you're just starting out, nobody thinks that these things are possible. But when you fast forward 10 years, because you have a long-term plan, and all of a sudden you're making an exit and the investors are trying to say bye, and you're like, but wait a minute. And you wave that paper in front of them like, oh, you held on to that, right? There's a payout. It's not as easy as we thought. I literally had one of the investors who I trust and I'm a friend with implicitly. He says, Jim, there's no way they're going to sign off on that. Well, it was ironclad and they had to sign off on it. And we had a nice exit from the company that I started because I'd taken the time to have a long-term vision, not only of the company, but of my own employment with my own company. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, you want to walk through it with me, I would encourage you to call me because it could save your rear if your investors start taking control of the company that you started, or if your partners have more than you desire down the road. So happy to talk about that. So always have a long-term plan. So at church this weekend, and this is how I incorporate the business into it, we were talking about roads, highways, mountain roads. Up here in Montana, you've got a nice straight road heading way west until you get to the top of the mountain pass. But on the other side of that, going into Idaho, there was 100 miles of curves is how the story went. And in those curves are just like the curves you have in life and those twists and turns. Now, for me, just like I talked about, my wife pointed out that my company wasn't the same now that my investors had more influence over me. That was a twist in the road, a curve in the road. I've talked about my Spartan racing and things that I've done there, injuries that I've had, torn meniscus, often running for a successful Spartan competitive year, and I tear my meniscus, curve in the road. What do you do? How do you overcome that? Right? If you've got a long-term plan, you're not looking at what's happening right in front of you. You get on that road to recovery and you focus on what happens after that recovery. What do I do next? It's very similar to losing some customers. Maybe you're sales commission only and you lose some customers, like, oh no, you can be in the dumps over it, or you can realize, hey, this is a curve in the road. I need to focus on what I'm good at and what I can build and not dwell on what's happened. Get past the curve in the road. We saw during COVID, too many people got wrapped up in that curve in the road and they shut down. They lost their businesses. They didn't get creative. They didn't get scrappy. They didn't look internally to find out what they're good at, how they can survive, where they can find resources, who's there to help them, right? It's just a curve in the road. Know that once you get around that curve, it's probably going to straighten out again until you get to the next curve. That next curve might be a financial downturn. We saw that in 2008. We're seeing that now. Financial downturns happen. Those are part of the curves. So how do you plan on adjusting through the curve and getting past it? Staffing, inventory. The curves are endless. But what I loved about the lesson is if you know what your long-term strategy is and what that course looks like, it's a lot like when you take that GPS map. If you're zoomed in, you see the straight road to the top of the mountain, then you see all the curves. But what happens when you zoom out? All of a sudden, that curvy road starts to get straight because you've zoomed out. What do you see? You see your starting point and you see the end point. And you realize, hey, I can get through this. Excuse me. So don't be intimidated by the curves. Anticipate them. Be ready for them. Rachel, I'm going to go to you briefly before I do part 2 on my lesson here. Give us some examples of some curves that you got through and how you got through them.
Okay. So you guys have ever seen that graphic on social media where people are like, this is like you and this is your plan, and then it's like God's plan and it's like a twirly swirly loop-de-loo And I think that's kind of how I feel a lot of the time. So examples of the curve. I mean, injury is one for sure that I think you mentioned. Like I was a college soccer player and tearing my ACL. That was a curve. Didn't see coming. And I can say everything from having children was a curve, to getting divorced was a curve, to, you know, working in an ad agency that lost a big client that laid off their entire department. That was a curve, right? You just, there's been so many for me. But I think the part that I want to focus on is that what's happened that's noteworthy is I've gotten much better at how to cope with the curves. Because when I was young, I would really let them shake me to a point where it was almost debilitating, and I didn't know what to do next. Versus like, okay, like I'm a little bit older, a little bit wiser, a little more confident in who I am and what my skill set is and how it can be applied. And then it's like, all right, I can breathe through this. I can take the time that I need to feel it. Maybe I need to sit and feel it for a day or two or whatever, a limited amount of time where I'm going to let myself lick my wounds on this. And then I'm going to pick myself up and I'm going to have a new plan moving forward. And the ability to come back from that, and with the tools to do it in a healthy way. I think we can teach and train our kids and our employees how to do that too. As recent as this afternoon, I'm not even kidding you. One of my kids was having kind of an emotional curves, and I literally got her onto the In Harmony Sound Lounge for a 10-minute meditation session. I want to teach her different tools of how she might choose to deal with things, right? I mean, this was a little one, right? But there are going to be bigger turns along the way. So I think knowing yourself well enough that you can get through them and get through them with a little bit of grit and a little bit of grace is kind of the secret sauce that has worked for me. And I no doubt that there's going to continue to be the things. It's like the serenity prayer. I don't know why I'm being so biblical today, but it's like, God grant me the serenity to control the things I can, the courage to, the serenity to control the things that I can, oh my God, why am I blanking on it? And the wisdom to know the difference. The words are escaping me, but I say it in my head all the time. So anyways, that's my thoughts on curves.
I appreciate that. I've known Rachel long enough to have been here for her curves and twists and turns in her life. And what's so great is what I see now. I can think back on some of those conversations, and it almost seems trivial at the time, when you look back at it. And here she is getting ready to launch her book and be on stage with some of my heroes. It's pretty fascinating when we look at things in perspective. And the point of this is I just want to remind people, we're going into the last month of the summer. We all go through life changes in the summertime, and whether we've been on vacation or we're getting ready to go out and things have been a little bit slow, we've been enjoying our families because it's summertime. There's always that uptick, school's back, let me get back to work. And I want to just remind people that as you start hitting curves in the road, after you've had an enjoyable summer, or maybe it's been a long, dry summer for you, just know that there's something on the other side of this curve, and to stick it out, and it'll get easier, and you can expect the next curve from there. But if you're planning out your long-term strategy, you'll be less affected by these curves. So real quick, for everybody that's on the call right now, in the message, put where you're at today, right now, in your business on a scale of 1 to 10. How are you operating today in your business? And I'll go first. I'm probably a 6 right now. There's a bunch of things that I'm thinking about that I'd like to do before this day wraps up to hit a 10. And I talked about this last month about, resetting yourself on a daily basis. Are you giving it everything you can per day to push through that curve, or push through a lull, or just push through the moment? So where are you at right now? As a reminder, I feel like I'm at a 6. Okay. I've done a lot of work for one client. There's some other stuff I want to do for another. And I know I want to get caught up because I'm going to be working remotely here in about a week. So for those of you that aren't where you want to be, use this call as a little, little charge to get past and through the day and try to do something before the end of the day so that you feel like you've taken your number at least up 1 or 2 or all the way to that 10, that you've given it your all as this day wraps up. Even if you got to step aside for a little bit or stay up a little bit later after the family goes to bed, use this time to give yourself a little spark and get ahead, as well as think about what your long-term strategies are. And maybe that's what your exercise is to get you to a 10, is that you're a little bit more attentive to what your long-term strategy is going to be. All right, part 2. I love that. Hey, Craig, distractions get me all the time. And that's probably why I'm a 6 instead of where I want to be. Part 2 of this is to touch on a couple of things that have recently been on my podcast with Rod, and that was preparedness. And that goes along with your long-term strategies. Are you prepared at home and in business for these curves and these twists and turns? And the reason why this was such a discussion with Rod recently was he was going in for this surgery. He says, Jim, anything could happen. I just updated my will. I was like, wow, that seems rather drastic. But you know what? He was prepared for anything. And that was both in business and in personal. And I can only aspire to be that prepared in everything I do as Rod was going into this surgery. He took it seriously enough to review his entire life in the last 2 weeks and put on schedule, on paper, what would get him to a point of being overly prepared for whatever would happen. Now, the way I see it, he's got he's on the other side of the surgery now. That guy is so much further ahead than probably the rest of us on this call because he did the work. And imagine that in 2 weeks, he got himself not only prepared for whatever comes his way, but beyond that. If we could just be that prepared in our businesses now, we could operate at an 8, 9, or 10 every single day and know that we have a long-term strategy. I know for me, every year, taxes become that burden. It's tax season and, I always file an extension. I've got all these businesses. If I could just be prepared enough to get ahead of that curve, I'd relieve a whole bunch of tension off my plate. I know Sam's hearing this and she's just cringing too, because I got her into the habit of prolonging the inevitable too, right? So there's always ways that we can be more prepared in personal and in business, and take that to heart in what you do in the coming weeks, as well as your long-term strategies. We also put out a podcast, and this is a tribute to David Meltzer, who was my business coach. He'll be on stage with us in a couple of weeks. He always talked about paying the dummy tax. And I just encourage you briefly to think about, what the dummy tax actually means and what value this group can bring to you so that you don't have to pay the dummy tax when you've got resources right here. Rachel, if you haven't heard the show yet, Rod and I both talked about some of the businesses that we've worked for in the past and the variety of things that we've done and where we paid some dummy tax. So people had some reference. It's all the way from retail. Of course, Rod's famous coyote hunting. I did some TV work for a couple of years, different things, but don't pay the dummy tax when we have here for you. So I just want to remind you, that's what this group and community are all about. Rachel, I'll give you a minute to think about it, but maybe you can recap some of the businesses that you've been in your career to remind others of where you might be helpful for them if they come looking for something. We know you're the marketing queen, but maybe there's some other things that we don't know about you. And then let me just talk about a couple other things, then I'll open it to you, Rachel, and then we'll go to some Q&A. Fourth quarter this year, 2023, please plan on it being brutal. We're going into an election season. Because I'm in that side of the world in politics, I'm already seeing what's happened, some of the beatings that politicians are taking, some of the things that they're going after. 2023 fourth quarter is going to be brutal. Please plan your businesses accordingly, strategize, don't get caught in that curve blindsided. know right now, money's going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. And then you're going to see some relief from the opposing parties in 2024, trying to we call it politicians creating a fire so they can put it out later and go, hey, I'm the fireman, I put the fire out. Okay. That's what's going to happen in the fourth quarter, maybe into the first quarter of 2024. Plan your businesses accordingly. Be smart with your money and have alternative plans to what you're doing. That's just where I'm at. You guys can take it for what it's worth, but that's how I'm looking at it. All right, Rachel, how about a couple things that we might not know about you, places that you worked or value that you bring to the table so we don't have to pay that dummy tax?
All right. So I think I've probably mentioned the crisis of confidence before, but I would say that you have to look out for that as a general overview for mistake making, because when I first started my marketing company, which I'd always wanted to do. I mean, I remember being, in my early 20s and sitting down with my newly appointed boss and her being like, what's your 5-year goal? And I'm like, oh, just start my own business and be a competitor of yours. She's like, okay. But anyways, I finally started my own company, and within 6 months of doing it, I was profitable, which by the way is unheard of. And now I know that, but I was so nervous and so scared and so like having so much self-doubt that when I got offered to be acquired, I jumped at it. And I was like, oh, why? And I got advised by people not to do it. And I was like, no, but it'll be great because I'll have more security. And within 3 months, or even shorter, I realized that no, like I was doing the right thing. My clients didn't want to be there. My staff didn't want to be there. Like I needed to just be comfortable betting on myself. So don't fall victim to that crisis of confidence, even if you are having early success and you like get an offer that sounds really great. It might not be the right path for you. So I would say like, stay true to your vision and your mission and, what your overarching goals are. So that's one thing. And the second thing is when I started a company, a different company, the Lynx Bourbon, the liquor company, everyone was asking me if I was going to take outside money. Oh, how much capital have you raised? How much capital, or what VCs are you working with? And I felt this pressure to like take outside money, but I was a little older, a little wiser. I was comfortable betting on myself, and I kept having to like push people back and be like, nope, I'm not doing that. And everyone who, honestly, I don't know why people were saying that. It was like the trendy thing to say. These weren't like people who knew better. They were just everyday friends and family. But like, don't let yourself get bullied around or pushed around by people that are really don't know any better, So take advice from mentors and people in your life that actually have been there before versus just like a friend or a family member who's fading interest is like going to say the trending topic that they happen to read about. So that's another piece of advice. Let's see. Those are two that really come to mind. Oh, I'll give you one more. I'll give you three. So my last one. When I was starting my first company, I had somebody who was kind of like working nearby me at the time that really wanted to be my business partner. But I feel very strongly that a business partner is like a marriage, and I didn't feel comfortable. So I listened to my gut, I listened to my inner voice and said no. And, that was one of the smartest things also that I didn't do. I've seen friendships get torn apart. Families get torn apart, all sorts of terrible things because people enter into business relationships and then they end up fighting over roles, responsibilities, money, all sorts of things. So it was really smart of me not to take on that partnership, even though it would have made somebody else really happy. So just, I think overall, like trust your gut, have faith and confidence in yourself, and take advice from people who really know what they're talking about. Like this group is a really good place to ask those types of questions and lean on our experience and resources as you're all building your enterprises.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Okay, Fred just got here, so he doesn't know the exercise, but Fred, what we're doing is we're posting where we're at right now on a scale of 1 to 10 in your success today for your business goals. All right, so put it in the chat. By the way, I haven't seen Jocelyn, Sam's, Taylor's, or Wayne's. Where are you at right now on a scale of 1 to 10 on your business goals and objectives? Part 2 of that, and this is private, write it down on a piece of paper in front of you. And that is, where do you want your salary to be or your personal revenue to be per month? Where do you want your personal revenue to be per month? And let's say before the end of the year. All right, let's be aggressive with that. Where do you want that to be per month before the end of the year? Okay, now I want you to look back at your score today, where you're at. What are you going to do before this day is up to work a little bit closer to achieving that monthly goal? And if you're not quite sure, then use that time to just blue sky ideas on a piece of paper. What I used to do is get a piece of paper and say right at the top, ways I could make money, and just list them all out, right? All the way down to selling something at the pawn shop, right? How many ways can you make money? Now, if you really want to take that exercise to the final step is, where does that monthly salary or revenue play into your personal values and your long-term goals? And adjust accordingly, right? So maybe your monthly salary is 20 grand and you're like, well, I would really have to sacrifice a lot of my family time. Maybe it's really 15, maybe it's really 10, right? Make the adjustment after you put the number there to ensure that it fits your values and your long-term goals, okay? But I really would like to see you when you get off this call. If you're not a 10 right now, and I'm not seeing any 10s popping up, Jocelyn, thanks for putting it on there. If you're not a 10, do something after this call to move yourself up just a little bit further. Okay, I'm open for questions, comments. Fred, appreciate you coming even late. It's great to see your face. You can listen to the beginning of the recording later if you like. It was about long-term strategies. You can also listen to the podcast that Rod and I put out. One, we paid the dummy tax, and the other one was preparedness is what it was called. So also, go to Craig since he's got his hand up before I do that also. Go ahead, Craig, unmute yourself.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about this group, but every time I come in here, the topic is relevant to whatever is happening this week, this day. I don't know, but this curve in the road situation. Rachel, my daughter, tore her ACL playing soccer a month ago. She just had surgery last week. Best surgeon in Orange County. Today, I got laid off from Dell Technologies. Walked away with a 6-figure package, but I didn't have my pity party. I went straight to my network. I started calling people, finding out who has opportunities, where are they hiring, who needs leaders for their organization. And then I made a commitment to double down on Pre-Sales Alliance this month, and we're going to get that launched. So I've got a buffer. I can spend a lot more time doing something that I really, really want to do, and go build hopefully something that can turn into something great, down the road. And it's going to allow me to still provide for the family, not have to worry about money for the next 6 months. And unless I really want to take something new on right away. But yeah, man, it's a big curve in the road these last few weeks, and no distractions. Just keep going, keep plugging along. Go find, no sense in standing still.
Absolutely. Thank you for that share. That's a big share. And that's a lot of curves all at once for the whole family. That's man, the ACL, man, that's gonna take her a long time. I hope that she's okay, because I know that at that age can be tough.
Yeah, she's 16 years old. She's a type 1 diabetic, so it's gonna be a little bit longer healing process for her. But this is her second one, so she knows what to expect. So we're behind her 100% and get her to PT 2 times a week.
Yep. You know, the other thing that I didn't share when I was talking about things, I thought of one other like bonus item. And I think you might want to keep this in mind in your situation too, is as I was so nervous to become an entrepreneur for the first time, I was delighted to have a profitable business. And that was like step one. But step two was, how do I make this the most viable and like safe business as possible? If you think of a pie, right, of like all these different slices. I had seen advertising agencies and other businesses fall into trouble because one client or one revenue stream was like, 60% or 80% of the pie, right? Or anyone that works for has one job, right? Like that's the 100% of your revenues in one piece of the pie. So diversifying revenue streams was my second big major step. Was, all right, they say statistically entrepreneurs should have at least 3 revenue streams. Well, I went way further than that because I felt like as a single working mother, I needed to be like extra insured with that. So as you're building your plans for the future, I really look forward to hearing how you decide to slice up the pie for you. That's exciting.
Craig, thanks
Yeah,
for
and like the other thing that I didn't throw in there is I love to trade options in the mornings. So I gotta find a balance of okay, how can I continue to make money doing that? How can I continue to focus on pre-sales alliance and provide benefits and additional income for the family? So figure it out.
Craig, awesome share, and appreciate your transparency with the group. I'm sure you can lean on anybody here for anything you might need, but I sense in your voice that you're not going to be derailed by all this. And I will tell you, it's funny, when I worked for In-N-Out and I was there almost 11 years, and it was a family ordeal. And not only was my family involved in the leadership, but I had built a lot of friends there. And what was crazy is everybody would ask me as I ran into them after I left there, "Are you okay? Is everything good? How's life?" They were all looking for my acknowledgement that life was good on the other side of something. And I can already sense in your voice that life's going to be good on the other side. Even your picture, you've got a smile there, and you said that was post, COVID notice when things got shut down. So I have a feeling that you're in for great things. Back to your point about, every call that you've been on has been spot on. I think the reality of that, Craig, is that we're all going through the same things. We all have our challenges. We all have our wins. We all have our losses. We all have our lives and families to deal with. It's the fact that we're choosing to be a part of a community and being open about it and honest about what we're doing and what our challenges are, and being willing to share or being willing to listen. And that's where real work begins, where we really can dig in and get past some of these challenges. So I don't think it's by accident that these messages relate, and I never want to turn these business calls into a sermon, but it's interesting because when I'm going through challenges and I go to church, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, the pastor knew exactly what I was going through. How did he know that? It's because we're not afraid to present what we're seeing and hearing and having some vulnerability here, right? So I'm glad that you're here. I love that we're going to be a part of this story to see what you do next, because I think that's going to be the most exciting part. And there was a question from Fred in there. And Fred, I know you got your hand up, but I'll ask Rachel or Sam. Fred was asking if either one of you are registered as a woman-owned business. I'll speak for Sam. She is listed as the sole female owner of her LLC. And I don't know if she hasn't leveraged it to gain anything yet, because I know sometimes there's some benefits. What about you, Rachel? Are you registered as a sole female owner?
All right. So yes, I am, but having your business created that way is very different than having it certified as being that. And there's a lot of different organizations that can certify you. There's one in particular, and the reason I'm going to go into this for a second is because if you get certified by one of the lower brow ones, then it doesn't really do much for you except for give you a logo to use. But there are other ones that if you get certified, it's very rigorous, and then they qualify you for government contracts and grants. And because a lot of government RFPs now say, like, 10% of the budget must go to, a woman-owned business or a diverse-owned company, right? So depending on what those rules are, you would qualify to be a subcontractor to a larger organization that might be going after the whole contract. And so, like, I'll put in the chat the organization that we went and got certified from, and it took probably a year to get this certification. And because of it, we're able to go in on a sub with a college university right now on a big grant that we're trying to get. So it's opening other doors. And I'd highly recommend, if you're a minority or women or veteran, that you go through these steps to do that. I'll put a couple links.
All right, thanks, Rachel. Fred, go ahead and lower your hand if you got a question. Other than that, hopefully that helps you out.
Yeah, well, I got a quick question. I didn't know, like, diving into this, I serve the construction market, and a lot of these programs are federally funded. So like the Department of Transportation, underground rails, things of that nature. So I keep getting the question if, we're a diversified or a minority-owned business, women also classified. But as I dive into it, I'm starting to see that there's different classifications and ways to come about it. And I have no problem putting my wife's business, or our business, 51% as my wife, but because it'll open a lot of doors. And I think the number that I read is 30% of these budgets are required, if they're federally funded, to utilize, women-owned businesses or diversified businesses. So I was just curious if anybody has been through it, and if you've got some links, that'd be fantastic, because it's a lot more than I expected. I thought it'd be pretty straightforward, but I guess there's different types and different ways to do it. So if one's better than the other, I'd appreciate any guidance.
Yep, I will do that. The other thing is, on these government, they're both state and federal websites where you can get listed as a preferred vendor. And you can go in and put in like different codes based on the type of business that you're registering as. And then when RFPs get distributed, you'll be on their list.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So,
Fred,
but I do know that it takes it a while.
Fred, you can also look at grants and different things that are available in your industry. Maybe there's a safety grant or something kind of post-COVID, what have you. Just remember, most of that stuff has some type of string attached. We see a lot of that in school, or in government. When we start taking Fed money, then we got to start following Fed policies. So might not be so bad in this particular small segment of what you're doing, but read all the fine print. You want to be forced into a corner having to do something that the Feds want you to do if it doesn't align with what your company is, right?
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Any other business questions that anybody wants to throw out there? Wayne, I'm glad you're an 8. I'm not surprised. You're an awesome hustler. I know that you're always after it and, coming out the other side. So love seeing you on these calls regularly as well. So thanks for that. Hey, just a thought, we'd love to have you at our event on the 24th. If you can't be there, maybe consider donating or sponsoring a youth. It's $25 for a student to come. If you know anybody in the Orange County area that you'd like to see some value there, maybe sponsor a youth. The tickets are going to sell out. We just pushed out to David Meltzer and Robert Green to their network. So if you don't have yours, first of all, grab it. Fred, I'm not sure I saw your name on the list, but not to call you out. But they're going to sell out when those guys start pushing. So anyways, we'd love to have you all there. All right. Rachel, you want any final comments? Because I'm not going to drag it out. We can all get back to our nights. Obviously, I'm at a 6, so I got a little work to do at my desk here. Again, if you weren't on the call earlier, I was complimenting Jim on a great job on Kush Cube. Guys got some marketing stuff going there. Proud of him. So, Rachel?
I think I'm good. I just put those links in the chat, but also on the back end of Y.E.S. And I really hope that you guys can all promote the event. Even if you can't go, like, post about it, tell your people about it. I'd love to see as many of you there or friends of yours there as we possibly can. And I'm really looking forward to it. Like all being together and all having this kind of a call, but like in person, with other people who share our same values in our community. And anyone who's going is going to get a free copy of my book pre-release too. So there's that. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna do a quick share before we hang up, and hopefully this will resonate with you, because I think we all need to have our dreams and our goals and things that we aspire to do. And maybe you've heard me talk about public speaking. And when I was 16 years old, I heard Mark Victor Hansen speak at In-N-Out Burger. It was a corporate event. And he said, what you believe is what you'll achieve. It was at that age that I said I wanted to be a public speaker one day. And I've been on a lot of stages in my career. I've spoken to as many as 500 people in a classroom setting at Irvine College. But to me, it was never a planned out, this is my event. I'm going to pick the guest speakers. I'm going to host it. I'm going to market it and push it. And I never envisioned being on a stage with two of my mentors or people that I looked up to, like David Meltzer and Robert Greene. And I've been paid to speak before. This year, I booked a whole bunch of gigs at the beginning of the year, but they were never what I had put on. So, even all those years ago when I envisioned this, it's finally coming true for me in a way that I envisioned it. And I just want to give you that example and know that as we're walking through this and we're asking, hey, buy a ticket or tell somebody about it, it's because we're bringing something to life that, I've been thinking about for 30 plus years. And as Rachel said, she's excited she'll be launching her book. So know that when you have your dreams and your visions and things that you want to accomplish, they can come true if you work towards it. This just happened to come rather rapidly, but it doesn't seem as hard as I thought because I've been thinking about this for 30 plus years. So anyways, look forward to next week's call. If there's no more question, thank you everybody for being here. If you're on the group chat, you need something, hit us up, hit me up, whatever you need, we're here for you. See everybody next Monday. So thank you.